Someone probably everyone knows, Paula Kalinowski, a hydrologist with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, and she'll be talking about the Minnesota Stormwater Manual with a quiz to start. So hope you're ready.
Yeah, I feel especially bad about that quiz just at the moment, following that really interesting talk with a quiz on regulations. But we're going to go through just 5 questions. The first couple are kind of review from topics that were covered by John Chapman and my colleague Todd Smith yesterday, and then we'll talk about those, and then we'll kind of look at what information we have in the Stormwater Manual on this topic, focusing on the pond dredging, but kind of also on pond maintenance. So I guess I'm able to see the responses here. So I'll wait for a few more to come in. Which of the following maintenance-related items are required for the stormwater wet ponds under the construction stormwater permit? And it looks like I've got a lot of time to put the glasses on. We're getting a lot of hits on the second option, the persons, organizations, or entities responsible for long-term operation and maintenance. That is absolutely correct. That is a requirement of the permit. Getting a lot of hits on a schedule of annual and periodic maintenance that must be included in the project SWIP, but that is actually, I didn't bring up my Todd. I'm kind of blanking. I guess I'm kind of nervous.
Can you read it again?
The first option, a schedule of annual and periodic maintenance must be included in the project SWIP. And that is not true, actually. Seems like it should be, though, right? We look for maintenance agreements, but a maintenance agreement is something that a local governmental unit may decide is part of their ordinance when they're reviewing plans, etc. They may require that, but it's actually not required in the construction stormwater permit itself. We do require a maintenance access be included for wet ponds. Will that maintenance typically 8 feet wide? We don't have specific design requirements for it otherwise. Will it be adequate? We kind of end up leaving that to the local governmental unit again. They may have specific design requirements for those maintenance accesses. There's one other that was mentioned in John Chapman's talk about cleaning out the permanent stormwater BMPs prior to them being turned over to the owner. That kind of raises some questions about, say, pond dredging. Are the same rules applicable when you clean out your pond at the end of a construction project? And Todd, do we have an answer on that one? Todd Smith, who spoke yesterday, is our construction stormwater permit expert. I'm going to say it depends.
For which piece?
The final clean out of a permanent pond at the end of construction.
Yeah, it has to be cleaned out, meet the requirements
Right.
at the time of termination.
Right. Do they have to test the sediment as they would in a dredge project?
No.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. So, some fuzziness. The construction stormwater permit, of course, applies to construction projects, but it does have an eye towards maintaining these things in the long term, right? We can only regulate during construction, but we do try to put some pieces in place to help you with that. So let's go to the next question. Do I have control of that, or is that just you? Okay, thank you. So now we're looking at the MS4 permit. So which of the following, are they working ahead of me?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't know that. I mean, I guess I do, looking at the answers. And it looks like, yes, permittees must maintain an inventory of all of their ponds and BMPs. Yes, permittees must inspect those ponds at least once per each permit cycle, which is typically 5 years, but sometimes that varies depending on different things that are happening at the state level. The others, permittees must sample pond sediments. No, not necessary unless you're doing maintenance. The requirement to remove sediment when the pond efficiency falls below 60% seems like it could be a criteria. But again, the MS4 permit, John Chapman and Todd covered this. It doesn't actually have specific requirements regarding how you conduct your inspections. I mean, there is a schedule of inspections that you need to follow. Specific assessments are not spelled out in the MS4 permit. It does require that MS4s put in place an assessment procedure for assessing your BMPs, and that you perform needed maintenance as soon as possible. So, and it also requires that you have a regulatory mechanism for inspecting and potentially enforcing maintenance for private BMPs when those are not performing to their proper function, I believe is how it's stated in the permit. So I'll look at where this is in the stormwater manual a little bit, but I'm going to focus again more on the pond dredging pieces that we have in the manual. So can I go to the next question, or? Okay, all right. A permit is required for all stormwater pond dredging projects, true or false? And I kind of did expect a little bit of a split on this one. Looks like we're getting mostly false. And I would say it is a bit of a trick question, right? So because the question says, is a permit required for all stormwater pond dredging projects? If we're talking about any permit, you know, our previous speakers were talking about right-of-way permit and some kind of parks permit. You know, probably, if someone just said, will I need a permit for a dredging project? I think I'd say probably. But is it strictly required for all of them? Not at the state level. So it really does depend on where your project is, how big it is, et cetera, et cetera. And we're going to talk a little bit about that when we look at what's in the stormwater manual. So the next one. Which of the following is not included in the Minnesota Stormwater Manual? And overwhelmingly, people are voting for a comprehensive guide to conducting pond dredging operations. That is true. We do not have a comprehensive guide. We are not dredging contractors. We don't pretend to have that kind of expertise. But we do have guidance for how to plan your dredging projects and some other information, both related to permits and just the logistics of those operations. And we'll take a look at that information in the manual. We definitely have information on to help you complete your normal maintenance, your regular inspection schedule, how to assess your BMPs, and certainly other information about operation and maintenance of BMPs. So the last one, let's see. Oh, we kept this one. Yes, we do have guidance. So I'll just skip over to the next question. And which of the following types of guidance are included in that guidance that was just mentioned in the previous question, managing stormwater sediment best management practices? And yes, it was an easy question, all of the above. We talk about the type of sampling that you need to do, number, depth, what analytes you need to have that sediment tested for, how can that sediment be reused, or does it need to be disposed of? How do you make that determination? How do I find a facility that will accept those sediments if I cannot reuse them? And then some pros and cons of different dredging. Those are all part of the information that's in that guidance document. So now I'm going to switch over and take a look at the stormwater manual and the information that we have in it.
Just want to be here. Oh, shoot, your link's closed.
Oh, well, let's just open up the manual. We're going to have to kind of do this on the fly.
Yep.
Okay.
You know where to go?
I do, yeah. So I did have this set up earlier, and I hope it's readable. It's kind of hard for me to see from here, but I know when you're looking at a web page, please let me know if I need to, you know, zoom in or zoom out or something, because it is kind of hard to look at. So how many people have been to this new stormwater manual webpage? Looks like most people. Okay, so just up front, I'm so in awe of all the different people that are here today. And I really want to thank you for your patience with the new manual. I have so much respect for my predecessor, Mike Trojan, and I know you all do. I'm pretty sure most of you were familiar with Mike. You know, this is a work in progress, and at some point relatively soon we'll have to remove that new label in parentheses. Just as an FYI, we're getting close to finishing our first round of QA/QC, so we've been through about 95% of the pages in the manual just to look at fixing links and getting things to look normal, and then we've got about 75% of the pages tagged to menus and things so that they're getting easier to find. And I do appreciate your patience, and one of the reasons I point this out is that the section that we'll be looking at today on maintenance is one of those that is maybe deeper in development at some level than some of the more established sections in the manual. And that is kind of a good thing because it is a newer topic. It is one that we've been paying attention to what's going on. My colleague Joanne Betcher is our Stormwater Research Liaison, and so she keeps tabs on what's going on in the Research Council, and we listen. You know, we are listening to what our permittees need. We're not just here to say, thou shall do this and not that. MPCA very actively listens and wants to help develop resources for their permittees so we can all meet the same goals. So again, apologies for the under construction type of environment that some of this information is in. We do have information, and we are going to be adding more on this topic. So how do I find that information? Well, hopefully you're finding this website reasonably easy to navigate. If you are interested in what the permits say specifically about maintenance or other topics, you can look for that information under we have a mega menu here at the top, much like the homepage, and that information would be found either under the Construction Stormwater Program or the MS4 program. I'm not going to visit those tabs right now, just because there's a lot of information there. It's maybe better for another day. The information on pond maintenance, assessment, etc., is kind of distributed throughout the manual, but there is, if you visited the wiki in the past, most of the linkages that were there are still there, so you can find related pages. So if you go to look at pond design criteria, you can link to pond assessment methods, to pond operation and maintenance. But you can also look by category, just general information about stormwater practices. You would find information about ponds and how they function under stormwater BMP, structural stormwater PMPs. And we can go down, and I could go to ponds. I think that's a little bit, we've had a lot of talks on pond design and function today. I'm not going to spend time there. In the last section here, design, assessment, and maintenance, you can look at information on stormwater pond assessment methods. I will say in this section and in the operation and maintenance section, we do link to, is Andy Erickson here today? We do link to the University of Minnesota Operation and Maintenance of Stormwater BMP's manual too, and there's very similar information in their manual and in the stormwater manual on general operation and maintenance topics. So so there's information about TSS and TP removal efficiency of ponds. I will say this is again a section I'm hearing so much new information. I'm very eager for us to get feedback from this conference and build out these sections further. And then if you want to learn about what we have on, sorry, wrong thing. Back up to the top. On operation and maintenance, that is available here. And see, big disclaimer, this page is currently under construction. So this is a section that we're actively reorganizing. This is where I have placed guidance related to sediment management in general, stormwater sediment management. And you can find that on the list of topics in the menu on the left. Oops, wrong click. Don't look away when you click. I guess that's the lesson. And again, a bit of a repeat message there that we are currently, this section is under construction. We have a project, an active project going on this topic. Bar Engineering has been helping us with that. So we've conducted a large literature review looking at studies that characterize stormwater sediments, what pollutants are we typically finding in them, what do other jurisdictions say about how they regulate stormwater sediments. And that information, some of that information will be added. And I know that there are people out here who recently responded to a survey of current practices. We have a draft menu. We sent out a survey asking people what are your current maintenance practices? What are your hurdles? What hurdles are you experiencing in getting regular maintenance completed, or getting enough regular maintenance completed, including ponds? And we'll be developing, so that survey, we've got a draft that we'll be looking at with BAR. And if you ask for a copy of that survey, you should be getting that sometime this spring. And we're developing a gap analysis that we can take to our leadership to talk about, hey, here's what is happening in our MS4 community. These are some of their needs. These are the research needs. And we can continue to build support for more research and money going into those areas, we hope. So no promise, but that is the intent. And to build out this guidance to help you be able to more efficiently complete your maintenance project. So within this section, this page is kind of a relic that I've rearranged a little bit, but our primary guidance on this topic is the Managing Stormwater Sediments Best Management Practices document. And we will take a look in that, but for the moment I'm going to go back to the manual. Oh, I should have. Sorry. Navigating and talking. And I'll go back. Okay, so I was sitting here yesterday and I was thinking about what I had in the manual. I had a page with some links to where do I go to find this information, where do I go? And I felt like it wasn't enough, so I revamped it. And if you've never seen the Stormwater Pond Sediment Management FAQ page, I'm not surprised because I just turned it on last night. It's a totally new page. And so what I did is I took some of these questions we were hearing and some of the things I knew that I had to ask when I was reviewing this guidance and just try to put them on a page where you can go to the question and then it will provide some information and direct you to the correct resources. Notice it does say that this page is undergoing review. I invite you to participate in that review. On the bottom of every one of our stormwater manual pages, you will see website feedback form, which I receive those messages. Now, if they're cruel, I might pass them on to my supervisor to answer because I don't want to be bothered with that. But no, we do respond to those, and if it's something, you can submit anonymously. You can also submit, with your name, and I will respond back to you, telling you this is either what I did or what I'm planning to do and when. We will work on them. I file them away when they're done, and I keep track of them when they haven't been completed. So please do that. It's very, very helpful. I do invite you to do that. FAQs. Is a permit required for stormwater dredging projects? That was our first question. Or that was the question I said I'd get back to. And I feel like I've already got to revamp this. It does focus on state permits here. So the question says no, MPCA does not require a permit for all stormwater dredging projects. You may need a construction stormwater permit if you're going to disturb an area of 1 acre or larger. You might trigger some other permits, probably not an SDS permit because that applies to like DNR, DNR type project, well, not DNR, but channel dredging, public waters, docks. Someone mentioned the Army Corps or Mississippi River Channel or those types of projects. If you're removing enough sediment, if you're going to store that or reuse it, that does require an SDS disposal permit. You may, if your dredging project involves a public water, you need to talk to the DNR. Those two entities, the solid waste folks and the DNR, have their own pages that I've got links to. And then from our last presenters, we also heard, well, you might need a right-of-way permit. I will also point out that some of our local governmental units have stricter triggers for construction type permits or erosion control permits or land disturbing permits. They might also require a notice of work activity. So you do need to check at the local level. We do not maintain a comprehensive list of all of those requirements from our local governmental units. Do you need a permit? There is a good resource on the MPCA dredged materials management page. This is the mothership's website from solid waste and remediation. Again, it walks you through the same stuff. If you are dredging in these areas and you're going to recover a large volume of material, then yes, you need an SDS permit. There's also information on this page about the stormwater projects, kind of walks you through, no, you don't need, as long as you're covered by a stormwater, like an MS4 permit, you don't need an SDS permit. And it links back to this guidance document. So most of the remaining questions that are part of my FAQ here are answered through looking at that guidance document. How many samples do you have to collect? What pollutants do you need to test for? How do you make sense of the results, etc.? That is largely, this guidance document addresses most of those things, or all of them. I'll have to look at the questions again. But I don't know if it would be better to look at them question by question. I had this set up before, I promise, but I'll go down the list here. Yeah, so how many samples do you need? That's based on the area that you're going to be dredging. We do have in Appendix A of this document, there is guidance both on the number and the spacing of the sediment samples that you should be taking. And then what pollutants you need to test for. So I will go to Appendix A here. And I probably need to make this larger or something. I don't know if people can actually see it. Probably not. Where's the... Here we go. Maybe not quite that much. Anyway. Yeah. Now I can't find the decrease button. Oh well, we're just going to go with it. There's also information about, well, what if I find different types of contaminants in different parts of my pond? I'm not going to talk about that in detail right now, but there are some strategies for how to deal with that. You might find different contaminants in different parts of the pond. Certainly sediment will tend to build up at a quicker rate in some parts of the pond. So what do you need to test for? And there are different levels. There's kind of a couple different factors that come into play here. We do have a list of contaminants that you need to test for if you are going to reuse or dispose of that material, right? Which kind of seems like that covers the options, reuse or dispose, but maybe we've had a few pilot projects where other creative things have happened, so maybe there's a time when you don't have to do the testing. But these contaminants are focused on PAHs because historically we had a problem with PAH getting into our ponds through roadways and what are all the sources of PAH? Coal tar sealants, thank you. Yeah, we had a problem with coal tar sealants, which have now been banned. But if you've got a pond whose history goes back before 2010, I believe, is when that ban was put in place, it may have those legacy contaminants. So that's one of the reasons that the guidance is kind of skewed towards PAHs. But the list that we require you to test for is summarized in the guidance. Also, we have a spreadsheet that has been put together for you to summarize those. And I think I can pull that up. I can see people are getting hungry. And those required testing includes metals, arsenic, copper, some carcinogenic PAHs and some non-carcinogenic PAHs, which are a little weird to deal with. You need to convert those concentrations to BAP equivalents, but that's what this spreadsheet is designed to do. Once you've tested your sediments, you're going to classify them, and I think this was mentioned by our last presenters. They are classified as level 1, 2, or 3 dredge material, depending on the type and level of contamination that's found. And those can be by the Minnesota, I don't know if that's a statute that actually regulates that, but depending on whether they're level 1, 2, or 3, different applications are allowed. Level 1 is appropriate for use on residential or parks land use. Then you move on to level 2, which is appropriate for, say, industrial land use. Once you're getting into level 3, it's not really appropriate for use as fill, and then you probably need to take that, dispose of that in a landfill. And again, we have levels, right? There's municipal mixed waste. Maybe you find more contamination and you might have to talk to an industrial landfill, might be able to accept some of that material. Or again, then we have hazardous waste management in the extreme case. I don't know that I've ever heard of a DRED project that had to do that. Has anybody had to take it? Okay, all right. So on this FAQ page, I do have links to these things. We do have kind of an overview flow chart that walks you through how do we classify these based on testing. And I don't know if that's gonna open for me right now. Here we go. This is something that was put together by BAR, so if you're confused about how do I do this, this flow chart walks you through, okay, let's do this testing. Based on the testing, which category does it go into? Based on those results, which one does it go into? And then you can kind of make sense of what you'll have to do with that sediment. I guess I will stop there maybe to see if there's any question that's burning, or if it's just people's stomachs that are growling. Sorry.
Thank you, Paula.
Yes, you're welcome.
And our intention is to send out direct links to these new pond sediment management pages in our post follow-up email to all of you. All right, so it's time for lunch. Same direction as yesterday. Lunch will be downstairs in the